make a mental note, text yourself, but just keep this kind of at the forefront. We'll revisit this later in the presentation. And I'll just read the questions. What do you think when you look at me? What kind of person do you think I am? And what kind of life do you think I've led to get to this moment here with you all today? So this right here is where I was born and raised. I'm from a tiny little town in Missouri called Kearney. It was a population of like 5,000 people. And in my town, people basically grew up there. They maybe went to college or university 30, 40 minutes away. And then they come back to the town and they never leave. And that's pretty much what people in Kearney, Missouri do. My parents had me when they were 18 years old. They were teenagers. My dad is there on the left at 18, and that's me at like 6 months old. And as you can see, I grew up around John Deere tractors. I was like the classic Midwest guy that was, just doing farm stuff. As you can see, I was born missing my leg, so I was looking differently than a lot of the kids I grew up with. I actually didn't see a person with a disability until I was maybe in my early 20s, so I was just around, everyday kids. And actually, we didn't use the word disabled in my household. The word was bad, and I'll revisit this later on, but yeah, my parents did not call me disabled. I wasn't allowed to use the word, and if somebody were to refer to me as disabled, it would offend my parents. And about 8 years old, I found sport, and the sport that I found was wrestling. And wrestling is pretty big in the Midwest. There's a lot of colleges or universities like Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio State. These are really prestigious wrestling programs in Division I college sports. And I was really drawn to maybe one day wrestling in college or wrestling in the Olympics. But I started wrestling when I was this age, about 8, and I actually didn't win a match until my 3rd year of wrestling. So I got beat every single time I stepped onto the mat, which is probably over 100. And how I kind of went through all this, my dad was sort of a genius without knowing he was a genius. My 1st year of wrestling, I was getting smashed every match. And my dad made me have this tiny goal. If I didn't get pinned, we were winning. So getting pinned is like the worst thing that happens in wrestling. You basically get on their back, they smack the mat, it's over with. It's like the ultimate defeat. So as long as I didn't get ultimately defeated by pinning, we were winning. So I may get beat 15-0, but if I didn't get pinned, we won. And I would walk off the mat, and my dad would be like, "Good job." Well, year 2, it was, how about you score, or keep them under 10 points, don't get pinned, and that's a win. And then I would have victories. And then in my 3rd year, it was like, how about you score some points of your own, maybe win a few matches. And I ended up winning a couple matches. So it was that process of how to itemize goals and not necessarily look at the big picture, but the small picture in it, which kind of kept me in the game. And I stayed into wrestling all the way through high school. I wrestled, started to get good, and kind of learned what it meant to work hard at something with my body. One of the differences of how I am now is obviously I run with a prosthetic blade. Back then I would actually take my leg off and wrestle with my leg. So I was the one-legged dude on the mat at all these tournaments around the Midwest, and literally the only person that I ever saw with one leg was me. So I was wrestling people 2 legs all the time. But that's kind of where I figured out how to train. And this is me in my early 30s. But up until that point, I didn't get to go to university because I didn't have an option for college because I couldn't qualify for any athletic scholarship. They didn't allow athletes with disabilities to compete at that level. I didn't qualify for any social aid, and basically was told college wasn't for me. So I went right into the workforce and started working at 20 years old, random weird jobs like I worked at Home Depot. I don't know if you guys know what Home Depot is, but it's like a home improvement store. I worked at IT. I worked at a Verizon wireless cell phone company, and I basically did that for 10 years until I kind of had enough with my life, and I felt like there was more out there, but I just didn't have the answers from where I was, because at this time I still had a dream of being a pro athlete. Everybody told me that it was impossible, that I was, dreaming a dream that was just never going to happen, and I need to give it up. But I felt like I could do it, and I didn't have any answers to basically say how I could do it, but I felt it in my heart, and that's when I left. So what I mean by left, I left my home of Kearney, Missouri, and I went to the east and west coast. But I want you to look at these two pictures and see, how did I go from this guy to this guy flying up around mountains and actually living my dream of being a professional sponsored athlete? Because a lot happened between this and this. And that's kind of what I want to tell you about today. And part of that journey is I left where I grew up, which is kind of the scariest thing in the world to do, because it's comfort, you know how things are going to be, and especially where I was born and raised, nobody left, everybody stayed. But I found myself called to leave with no plan. And luckily I ended up in this place called Mendocino, California, which is in Northern California, in the Redwoods, and it's really majestic. And I found myself there randomly, and I met people who had lived there their entire lives, and they lived differently than anybody I'd ever seen in my life. These people were really kind of living off the land. They didn't really care so much about their 9 to 5. They would take walks around the beach, and it was just really interesting people that I got to know. And some of the people I got to know had spent time in India. These people were successful in other areas of their life, and they ended up coming to this beautiful place and just living to be, happy. And I found that really fascinating. And luckily I made mentors that were able to guide me and give me insights that I couldn't obtain where I was born and raised. My parents could only teach me so much, and the rest of it was up to me to get other perspectives in life. And I didn't have the courage to do that until I was about 30 years old, and this is where I ended up. And from there, after being there for a couple of years, I found myself in India, and I was able to live with a guy named Muhammadji. He basically gave up all his possessions when he was in his 40s and lives in the ashram full time. And some would say that this guy was like the most successful meditator in India. So here I am, this guy from the Midwest who's been taught that money and power and all these things are how you measure success. And I'm with this guy who doesn't own a single thing to his name, but is celebrated as this world-renowned meditator who meditates. And I'm living with this guy, teaching me how to meditate, teaching me how to be a good person, which he didn't really have to teach me anything. He just assured me that I was a good person and that I could achieve my dreams. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be a monk. I'm going to put on the orange suit here, and I'm never going to leave this place. I found my calling, and Muhammadji, after about 6 weeks, was like, dude, that's not what you're going to do. You're going to go out to the world, and you're going to achieve all your dreams, and you're going to help all these people. And you're going to let me be here and meditate, and you can tap into me whenever you want. And that was a really transformational experience for me, because one, I didn't buy the experience, I didn't Google the experience, I didn't book it on anything. I just ended up in this place, and I don't even know how. I just kind of followed one thing to the next, and here I am having this most meaningful experience of my life, and I didn't pay anyone money. And that really kind of changed something in me, because everything in my life up to that point has been super transactional. Whether you're going to the groceries or you're paying someone to fix your house or your car or whatever it is, there's an exchange happening with money, and I didn't pay them anything. And they just basically said that the energy was the exchange, and it was breaking all the rules I've ever been taught in my life. And my parents told me, you don't take things for free, you pay for everything. So it was basically giving me new rules and beliefs and perspective, and that's what I was seeking. I got to see Mahatmaji a couple times after that. This was the time when this big wedding that I went to. But these are moments that this Midwest guy that I was in India, talking to guys who meditate for a living, was like I was Indiana Jones on this journey of uncovering like the mysteries of life. Shortly after that trip to India, I was super open to opportunities and possibilities, and so I went to this running festival, you call it, called Born to Run. There's a famous book called Born to Run in the US, and Born to Run is a book that follows these guys in the Copper Canyon from Mexico. They had a big, powerful journey that changed their life. They wrote a book about it, and then there's this festival. So I came to this festival after India to actually hand out coffee. And my goal was to hand out coffee, to talk to people about what I experienced in India, and to promote this nonprofit that I just started. And right when I got there, they basically said, hey, why don't you do this 10-mile trail race? And I had never actually ran more than 3 miles in my entire life up to this point, and I definitely never ran on a trail. So I was open to possibilities, and I said, you know what, I'll do this. So I ran the 10-mile trail race and finished, and actually had the most powerful experience I'd ever had in like a endurance or sport activity, where I crossed the finish line, I got emotional, I was crying, and I was like, why didn't anybody ever tell me I could run on trails? I'm 35 years old, I've been to national parks, I've seen mountains, I've been in the forest, but I've never ran here. I wish I would have known this in my 20s. And basically, what it boils down to, a good friend of mine who's a 3-time Paralympian, her name is Dana Arabich, has a saying that you can't be what you can't see. And essentially, I never saw anybody that looked like me on a mountain, on a trail, so I never really imagined it. And luckily, the universe invited me that day to come be a part of this weird trail run, and it changed my life. My life was never the same after this moment. And you would think that maybe that was where my running journey started, but it actually wasn't where it started. My running journey started in 2008. I got my first running blade. This is then, and I tried to make a Paralympic team. At the time, it was Beijing, and I had my eyes set on 100 meter, 200 meter, and I trained like a madman. That was crazy. I was angry. I was trying to prove something, and I ended up failing miserably at it. And I actually gave up running in 2012. Right after the cycle of London, I didn't make the Paralympic team, and I just said, you know what, running's not for me. I'm over it. I'm never going to do it again. And let's see here. I imagine. So after that event where I was on the trail and I had that magical moment, I started showing up to all these U.S. trail races, and I basically planted my flag for para-athletes and said, we belong in these races, because at this time, there were nobody with blades, nobody with disabilities out there with me. And so I started showing up to big, huge trail races. And I got the attention of a brand called On. And this is maybe March of 2022. And to be honest with you guys, I'd never heard of On. When they called me up, they were like, hey, we're this like really cool Swiss brand. Roger Federer is like part of this. We really believe what you were doing in life. Will you join us on this trail team? And at the time, I was really wanting to get sponsored by like the North Face, but this brand On wanted to take a chance on me. And so they actually gave me a professional running contract. So I got a salary, I got bonuses for performances, I got travel, and they're hooking me up with like, hey, you're gonna meet Roger Federer one day. So I said, hey, this is pretty cool. I think this is my dream, it's happening. So what do you do when you sign with the biggest brand in the world, or a bigger brand in the world? I put my sights on the biggest trail race in the world, which is called UTMB, which stands for Ultra Trail Mount Blanc. It's a big running festival that happens in Chamonix around Mount Blanc. They have 10Ks up to 176Ks. And there's 10,000 people a year that come to this place but there's never, ever been a person with a blade to ever come and finish a race there. So they basically backed me and said, yo, we back you in this, let's go do this. And this is one of the first Instagram reels we ever did together. This is OG me.
I've imagined crossing the finish line at UTB so many times. I think it's important for people like me to be on these events. It's a chance to elevate the disabled awareness in the world. My goal, honestly, is to get on that mountain and go as far as I can.
So that was the first big time thing. I was basically, it's not going. Like put on the map. Like people recognize me on Instagram, and I show up to this race. And I'm going to be super honest with you guys. I roll into the Chamonix Valley, and I look up at the biggest mountains I've ever seen in my entire life. And I had this thought of, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And the day was brutal. I was wearing still street tread on the mountains that didn't have a lot of grip. It was crazy climbs, and there's cutoffs in this race where you have to reach certain checkpoints by certain times. And I missed the very first checkpoint by 30 minutes, and they actually cut my race bib and said, you're done. But the very next day, I decided, you know what, I'm coming back the following year, I'm going to train all year long, and I'm going to show up to this race again, and I'm going to get it done. So this is me in 2023, the same race. I'm on-trail athlete Zachary Friedley. I'm here in Chile, France, racing MCC, year 2. Confident I could cross the finish line. That year I got to run with my friend, David Kilgore. He's the guy that actually signed me with on. He's the one that believed in me from the beginning. And UTMB allowed him to run with me because as a runner with prosthetics, here I'll stand up so you guys can see. So basically there's a lot of things that can go wrong here. I could have bolts go wrong, my tread could fall off, this piece could break, so sometimes I'm carrying extra stuff. And David was able to carry some tools just in case I got into a bind out there in the middle of the mountains. We were going to be all right. So it was me and him. And I crushed the uphills. I was way more prepared this time because I had 12 months to think about it. And I literally dreamed of this finish line every single day of my life in 12 months and envisioned myself completing this. I knew it was going to be hard. I mean, it was raining, snowing, the craziest conditions I've ever ran into this day. It was brutal. And we were running next to glaciers, and I made my way into Chamonix and got embraced by my team of pro athletes at the finish line. But what I learned that day, you would think that running 11 hours and 30 minutes might have been the hardest thing of the day, and actually it was the first time I realized in trail running that it wasn't enough to just show up and be there and cross the finish line. Because a year prior to this, I had been talking to the organization at UTMB. We were working on policies and procedures on how to accept para-athletes into the space and be welcoming and inviting to this thing. And everything that we discussed completely fell apart that day. I had race organizers from the halfway point, mountains hard enough, and then I have human beings around me telling me that I should quit. And so the experience really changed something deep down inside of me, and I realized the task that I set out to do was going to be harder than run a mountain. We have to change infrastructure from the ground up around the world. And that moment really hammered that home. But at the same time, that moment really changed my life in the sense of trail running was never the same. People recognized me as this guy that showed up one year and got smoked and maybe was never going to finish, to the guy that did finish. And then I got to race all over the world to become one of the most visible para-trail runners of all time. I've raced UTV, I've raced the iconic Series in Switzerland twice. This is in Tahoe, where I did a vertical kilometer. This is in Series, which is a couple hours away, running underneath 4,000 meter peaks. I finished that race 2 times. So this on thing really allowed me to really pursue and be visible all over the world. I've raced New York City Marathon, which was an insane experience. And I'll show you a little clip from this year that's pretty sick. So you gotta remember too, I'm still this guy that everybody told his dream makes sense. So, I mean, as a kid, I had no one to look up to. I had nobody doing what I envisioned myself doing. And I just kept the belief, I kept the dream, and put myself in different positions with different perspectives, and I eventually got there. I mean, I failed hundreds of times. But one of the things that someone told me that I want to tell you is, imagine if someone told you you were 500 failures away from reaching your dreams. How quick would you start to fail? And essentially, that's what happened to me. And we started to figure it out. This is just something funny of, not only do I get to race and do stuff, but everybody knows what TikTok is. Well, I get to make TikToks and talk about disability and put disability in the mainstream. And this is one of the funny videos we did this summer at UTMB. So my job is to just be visible and to show up and not let these organizations off the hook, to change it for generations behind me. This is another cool photo of another race that I've done in Manhattan, California. I talked at the Paris Olympics last summer, or I guess 2 summers ago. I guess they got me posing like I'm a GQ model sometimes. Climbing up glaciers and races. So essentially I've done everything you can name in trail running. And I'm kind of jumping all over here. I just kind of wanted to set the stage of, I've done all these things, but I'm still a little bit hungry for something more. And one of these places that I got to go is Ecuador. This is Cotopaxi. It's a 6,000 meter peak. And I went there in 2022 to climb this mountain with a group of other disabled athletes. I thought I went there to climb this mountain and have an all-time life moment of one of the tallest mountains in the world. And I, climbed it, summited it. It was an insanely hard experience that I've done. And I guess they told me too, I was the first person in history to climb it with a running blade, which I didn't know that I was going to be that guy, but I was. But here I am having this experience, on a glacier in Ecuador with a group of people that are kind of like me. And in that process, this is where it gets juicy. I meet this kid. So this is Zachary Ramos. At the time, he's 17 years old. This is in 2022. He's 17 years old. He speaks Spanish. He's never left Ecuador. He's never been around other people with disabilities. And he somehow gets plugged into this group to climb this mountain with us. And we were on this acclimation hike a couple days before we summited Cotopaxi. And an acclimation is where you go to like a mountain that's maybe like 5,000 meters to feel what it feels like, so your body starts to adapt. And once we did the summit of that, I I basically handed off my mountaineering gear to my guide, and I said, hey dude, I'm gonna run down the mountain to this bus because I'm training for UTMB 2023. So when I did that, I started to run. And all of a sudden, out of the peripheral of my hearing here, I hear this other noise of somebody. And I look over my shoulder, and it's this kid, Yahir. And he's running with me for like maybe 5K. And at this point in my life, I had never ran on a mountain with another person with a blade. So this kid's running next to me. And he kind of just like disappears and falls off. I get to the bus, we go back to the refuge, and he comes up to me with this translator. And he says, hey, Yahir wants to know what you were doing out there. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, he wants to know why you were running down the mountain. He's never seen anyone do this before. So I pull out my phone, and I show Yahir the pictures of UTMB 2022 where I got smoked and I didn't finish the race. And I'm like, dude, I'm actually training for this race in France. And I'm going to go there next summer, and I'm going to do this thing. Yahir says, I want to do that. Can you teach me how to do that? I'm like, dude, sure. I will for sure teach you how to do that. So I start this connection with this kid, and I go back home, and I start to kind of like figure out, I have this nonprofit. Our nonprofit helps people with like running. We create races like this for people that have disabilities. So me and Yahir started this connection, and this is my nonprofit here. This is our mission, is to get disabled people into trail races outdoors. So I started to think, how can I take Born to Adapt and implement things with this Yahir kid? So I started to leverage all my resources that I had. And one of them was, I happen to know randomly the ambassador of Ecuador for the US. I called this guy up and I said, dude, I'm trying to get Yahir a visa to the US. I want to get him proper prosthetics. I want to train with him. This kid, I see something in this kid. And the ambassador was like, dude, let's get him a passport, or let's get him a visa. So we got Yahir a visa. And we ended up bringing him to that weird running festival that I told you guys about called Born Run. I ended up getting Yahir there. And he came to this festival, and he actually broke my 10-mile record by like 30 minutes. But it started this thing where I saw this potential in this guy, but he didn't have any resources whatsoever. Yahir makes $12 a week, lives in a house full of 10 people. They share food, and I've just never seen anybody come from something like this. And he was basically like an image of me. I felt like I was helping myself at that age. The only difference is I was born in the US, he was born in Ecuador, which neither one of us had that decision. It's a random act of the universe of where you're born. So I just felt really called to mentor this kid and do something with this kid. So I started to use our nonprofit to raise money to get him the things he needed, his travel to these races. We ended up getting him new prosthetics. He ran this race in Quito called UTMB Quito, which is Quito's the capital of Ecuador. And he ran this jungle race, 31K. And that race actually qualified him to race in the UTMB, the big race that I've been training for years, you know? And also, just so you guys know, how much do you think prosthetics cost? Do you think people just maybe go get them at the store and they're accessible? That's actually not how it works. The one I'm wearing is about $50,000, and I get maybe one or two of them a year because mountains are hard on things. Yahir has zero chance to get a prosthetic like this. Nothing. So I have to basically leverage everything I have in the US, bring them in to get something that, in my opinion, is like a bare necessity of human right of movement. And with that, this is a video. This is another miracle that I pulled off with the help of a lot of people. We flew out here to Portland, Oregon last April, and I actually got a group called the Challenge Athletes Foundation to donate a blade. My prosthetist donated his time and supplies to make this kid the state-of-the-art running prosthetic. 100% changed my outlook on life. It's changed what really drives me. Of course, I still have goals of, I personally want to win Boston Marathon next year, and I want to, run sub 3 hours one day in a marathon. But what really excites me is being able to leverage the things that I've learned, the resources that I have access to, and to put people like Yahir in situations to be successful. It just so happens that Yahir, is turning out to be super successful. We brought him into Chamonix, France last summer to race the biggest trail race in the world. And in that whole experience, I also learned something. We almost didn't get him into France. This kid applied for a visa 6 months in advance. He got denied. We tried to get him to Switzerland. He got denied. And again, I'm faced with, wow, just because this kid is from Ecuador, he faces all these barriers in life where I, as an American, can book a flight on United.com and fly anywhere I want in the world and not even think twice. And this kid has all these things stacked up against him, and it just made me realize that the world isn't really created equal, and that just because of where we're born sometimes determines what's going to happen to us. But as a guy from America, a guy that's sponsored by a big brand, I have visibility and I can access resources, even though they're limited. I can access what I have. And we ended up pulling it off and getting this kid into France, and he raced the biggest trail race in the world. And we were able, to have cool photo shoots with him. And this is him preparing for his race. And this experience that I had with him, it changed my life. I woke up after Yahir crossed the finish line and basically knew that, the next finish lines that I want to have happen are for other people. And the next frontier in my life is fundraising enough money to scale my nonprofit to replicate the Yahirs all over the world, thousands of them. If we can do it with Yahir in Ecuador, imagine what I can do if somebody believed in me. And if On wrote me a check for $1 million or $2 million, we would have this happening. It would be not just this one-off experience. And obviously, you guys have seen that I like to do things that are impossible or hard, and this is the next thing that I want to do, is figure that out. This is Yahir and I at the start line of the UTMB. It's one of the most proudest moments, being there with his kids, seeing him go from 17 years old to 20 with all the barriers that he's faced at the start line of the biggest trail race in the world. This is like a highlight moment in my life. People have asked me what the coolest finish line or what the coolest race I've ever done, but in reality, it was witnessing this kid do his thing. And I was able to make a film about this experience with Yahir, with a alumni of the school. His name's Milo. He came and met me in Chamonix, and we made this film that I want to show you all. It's called We Belong. Trail running is exploding. When I first came to Chamonix in 2022 to race MCC, I didn't see another para-athlete. Now in 2025, numbers are up. We have an adaptive team. We got athletes from South America, North America, Africa, coming here to Chamonix, racing the biggest trail race in the world. We are here.
Hola, mi nombre es Zachary, tengo 20 años,
Maybe I should drop it off to 4K. Yeah.
actualmente hago lo que es el trail running y el paratletismo. Hace 3 años atrás no sabía lo que era el trail running. Gracias a Zach, un gran amigo que me ha ayudado en mi carrera deportiva, estoy muy alegre, muy contento porque en este mes voy a competir en la USS aquí en Chamonix.
because they've never seen someone that looks like them in the mountains. That's why visibility is so important. That's why your being here is so important.
Zach has probably been in the United States one of the biggest motivators who've been able to push more para-athletes into trail running. His platform has really helped influence so many young athletes like you here who didn't know trail running was an option for them because they didn't have someone who looked like them out on the trails. Growing up with a physical disability myself, I definitely felt that. I didn't really have an athlete that inspired me that I could look up to who was in a similar situation. So by getting more of these para-athletes onto the start line, into these races, we're going to hopefully inspire the next generation, and a lot of that is due to Zach.
Mi discapacidad la adquirí de nacimiento, fue una malformación del pie, me amputaron la pierna y a los 2 años comencé a utilizar prótesis y hoy en día pues estoy aquí corriendo. Mi sueño en el futuro es llegar a representar a mi país para atletismo en lo que es la velocidad 100, 200 y 400 metros. Me gustaría llegar a competir en los Juegos Paralímpicos en alguno de estos ciclos olímpicos.
What I believe is fueling the change right now to get more athletes with disability to the start line of trail races is advocates pushing for this change, but ultimately we can only do so much. So it really comes down to the race directors, the organizers, and people who want to champion this cause within their own spaces and communities. And hopefully this will uplift the entire disability community.
We believe the trails are for everyone because no pains, no judge. Traveling is about effort, it's about freedom, it's about nature, it's about connection with the whole community, and everyone deserves that, no matter your background, no matter your body. Our policy for participation, it's really a case-by-case approach. We want to discuss with every athlete to understand what are the fears, what is the situation, what do they need, and we try to find solutions so that the participation happens. The goal is to be respectful, is to be safe, and to be sure that the experience is very good. In that, Zach and Jair, they don't ask for special treatment, they are just asking to start the race. And for me, they are not just strong, they challenge perception, and for me what is the most important is that they expand the values of our community, the traveling community. And for me that's really a gift that they are giving to all of us, and I'm really thankful for that.
It's a dream come true to be on these trails with people from my community, my friends, and not be alone and isolated out there. Be high up in the mountains is amazing. To be next to a glacier, to be able to move and connect with each other and see each other in places that historically disabled people are excluded from. Change can start within the one community. All we have to do is invite someone that doesn't look like us to the next Wednesday night group run.
Trail running really should be for all, and everyone should get to experience the outdoors no matter what background they ultimately come from.
Gracias a todas las personas que hicieron posible esto, pues bueno, he tenido unas grandes experiencias con ellos, he conocido montañas que nunca pensé en mi vida conocer, o nunca pensé estar aquí en Europa, impulsando mi carrera deportiva.
Yeah, so that experience changed my life, you know? I didn't know that was going to happen, and you kind of sometimes have to listen to the universe. And after that experience, I knew for sure what my future holds. And that's making sure people like y'all here have access, have resources, and can be anybody they want to be in this world. So think back to those questions I asked you earlier, and see what your first thoughts were. I don't normally read off of a script, but I found this to be interesting, and I wrote it down. I don't have it memorized, so I'm going to read off of this. I want you to think back to those questions I asked you at the beginning of this talk. What was your first impression of me? What did you think I was going to talk about when we first started this conversation? Did you have any preconceived notions or judgments about the kind of life I led that has gotten me here to this moment with you? We make judgment calls about other people all the time. I bet you had some thoughts about who I might be even before I walked into the room. We make judgments about who we think people are, what we think they're capable of. We create stories and narratives about other people's abilities, about their stories. We put people in boxes because that is what we have all been programmed to do as humans since we were little kids. And most of all, we make those judgment calls about ourselves. Imagine if I had never left the place I was born. Imagine if I had never followed the inner knowing that was gently urging me to change my life. Imagine if I had believed my life was destined to be only what my parents and my family and society told me I could be. I would not be who I am today. I would not be sitting here. Taking a chance to bet on myself, trusting my own inner knowing, and making brave choices with love and compassion and curiosity has allowed me to harness my own limitless potential. It is what allows me to see and honor the potential and greatness in others, people like you out here, and disabled people like us all over the world. My message to you today is this: you are not bound by the circumstances in which you were raised. Your future is not predetermined. There is so much unexpected potential in each and every one of you waiting to be discovered. I would say that it's not just okay, but it's a gift to not fit into the norm or the boundaries of who or what other people think you should be. I challenge each of you in your lives, moving forward, to use your lived experience to find your own way and make your own impressions. Maybe there's a gap or something that you have already seen that you can solve in this lifetime. How will you make an impact during your very precious and limited time here on earth? That's all I got.